Russian rocket attack in central Ukraine killed at least 22 people and injured dozens more on a day when Ukraine observed its Independence Day and marked 6 months since the Russian invasion. These pictures of the devastation at a train station tweeted by Ukraine's foreign affairs minister. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the attack as he addressed the United Nations Security Council remotely. He'd been saying for days that Russia might try to do something particularly cruel this week. Large crowds in the capital of Kyiv have been banned through tomorrow for fears of another missile strike, but some people have been gathering to see the zombie parade of captured Russian tanks that are lining the main street there. The attack today came just hours after the U.S. announced its largest aid package to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, nearly $3 billion. It marks a transition from assisting Ukraine in the short term to helping keep them in arms for years to come. President Biden said the funding will go toward air defense systems, artillery, ammunition, drones, and also radar. President Zelensky does not want the world to forget about the conflict in his country as the war continues to drag on.
We need to be clearly aware that as soon as the world becomes tired of this war, that's going to be a great threat to the whole world and the threat of annihilating Ukraine. So we are grateful for any kind of assistance. We need more of it. That's true.
Earlier today in Kyiv, President Zelensky and his wife were part of a solemn prayer for Ukraine's service and laid flowers at a memorial dedicated to fallen Ukrainian soldiers. Zelensky then presented awards to service members for their bravery during the war. Zelensky also met face-to-face with outgoing UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who made a surprise trip to Kyiv to announce additional military aid coming from the United Kingdom. This all comes 6 months to the day that this conflict began. Russian tanks rolled into the country from the north and east. That was back on February 24th. And since then, thousands have died and millions more have been driven from their homes as Russia has shelled cities and buildings. Some 9,000 Ukrainian troops have been killed during the war. Nearly 6,000 Ukrainian civilians are confirmed dead. The UN says the actual death toll is likely much, much higher. More than 6 million refugees have left the country since all the fighting began. Destruction has been estimated at $113.5 billion, and it may cost more than $200 billion to rebuild. Joining me now is Kurt Volker, former U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations and U.S. Ambassador to NATO, now a distinguished fellow at the Center for European Analysis. Thank you so much for Kurt, for being here. We obviously have the right guy to be talking about this with tonight. It's so crazy to think that it's been 6 months, and I know this is a really hard question to answer, but you know, I'm sitting here wondering all day, like, how and when does this finally end?
Well, let me answer something else first, which is, what is the most significant thing we should know today, August 24th, 6 months after Russia's invasion? That is that Ukraine survives as a sovereign, independent European democracy. Putin's goal was to eliminate Ukraine, eliminate Ukrainians as an identity, and treat them all as part of a newly annexed Russia. And he's utterly failed at that. So this is a big success for Ukraine to be standing on this Independence Day and saying we're still here. The next thing is that where do we go from here? I think the Ukrainians have been able to stabilize the situation militarily. They're getting tremendous help from the United States. We cannot say enough about the effectiveness of the U.S. weapons and what we're doing to help Ukraine. And they're using that to undermine Russia's invasion force. It's not going to roll back overnight, but it is going to undermine Russia's ability to sustain this invasion. And ultimately, this will work in Ukraine's favor.
But how long can they go on like this, Ukraine? I mean, and exist as a country actively at war? I mean, you know, is this going to be another 6 months? Is it going to be years?
Well, how long can they go on? Ask somebody in the United States, in Ohio, in Oklahoma, in Texas, how long will you fight for your homeland, for your territory, your state, your country? They are going to fight until they can't fight anymore. And the key thing is that they win rather than they are defeated. And I think here, Ukraine actually has the will, and with our support, they have the means. and Russia does not. So I think that this fight will go on well into next year. We're going to see some Ukrainian advances, minimal but small and important Ukrainian advances this fall. We're going to see a chill over the winter. It'll hit the Russian forces hard. And then we're going to see renewed fighting next year. And then we'll go from there. But the Ukrainians are never going to give up their homeland.
Yeah, and you know, it's so admirable. Every time we interview them, it's incredible. Another thing I've wondered about, Kurt, is the sanctions. You know, when all of this started and it was in the headlines every day, it was like, wow, we have cut them off. They can't fly anywhere anymore. There's no money going in. But it seems like Russia's still chugging along.
Yes, yeah, and I think this is an important point about sanctions. Sanctions will never affect Vladimir Putin's decision making. He has decided that he's on an ideological crusade, a semi-fascist and definitely imperialist crusade to add lands to Russia, to say that the Russian Empire is back and it's greater than before. He compared himself to Peter the Great. So sanctions are not going to change his thinking. What sanctions will do, however, is change Russia's capabilities. They will erode Russia's ability to make war. They can't get chips now for precision-guided munitions. That means they're lobbing dumb bombs. That means their military assaults have less effect. They can't get the Russian economy going again. They're losing spare parts. People are leaving Russia in order to try to preserve their wealth. So these sanctions are having a big effect on Russia's capabilities, and that's what's going to undermine Russia's war effort, not that we're going to affect Putin's decisions.
Well, gosh, I think everybody hopes this ends soon, especially when we talk about the thousands of civilians, innocent civilians, that have been killed. Kurt Volker, thank you so much for coming on with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.